Anyway, welcome everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It's great to see you all. It's really good to see you all. I'm appreciating it. Wanted to welcome, we do actually have a visitor with us tonight. Gary Pfeiffer, our new interim executive director, is here, and his wife Hope. And I'm not sure that Hope has been introduced before. So just wanted to make sure that we welcomed Hope. And really glad you're on tonight, zooming in from Roanoke, I presume. And glad to see you both, and Shabbat Shalom. And glad to see everyone else who's on. I see people waving. Glad you're here. So it's a sweet start to a Shabbat that after a week that has weighed on my heart. I'm really grateful for the Shabbat because this week has been a challenging one, I think, on a lot of levels. And first, we had the news earlier this week of the shootings of half a dozen Asian women in Georgia, which has led to an elevation of the discussion about the rising violence and hate crimes that are being committed against Asian Americans in our country. And it's very painful to talk about, but I think it is going to bring an important reckoning that is happening in our nation. Oftentimes, Asian Americans are often not counted necessarily as minorities. They're not seen, and I have reasons why I think this is the case, but it is often the case. They're not necessarily seen in the way that other people of color are. And when violence is committed against them, we tend not to see it in the same way, which is something also that happens to Jews. Violence or discrimination against us is seen differently. And sometimes our society tends to see things also as either black or white. Today, we'll often talk about it in terms of black and brown or white. And Asians are none of those. So where do they fit in? And oftentimes, the way I have heard many people narrate it, they just don't. To hear them say it, their experiences are left out, glossed over, lumped together with other people of color in ways that aren't authentic to their experience. They're erased, rendered invisible over and over again. So I think it is right in this moment that we are being asked to really see the stories of Asian Americans in our country right now, to understand their experience here, especially in the wake of the pandemic, when they have been subject to so much more abuse and violence and harassment and murder. This really is our task now, and I really do hope that we take this up and we take this to heart. And I raise this because isn't this really also our issue as Jews? And can't we relate? Can't we also relate? That discrimination and harassment against us gets downplayed, erased, glossed over, eyes rolled at, shut down, silenced. No matter how bad it is, no matter how bad it might get, the Holocaust, for God's sake, 6 million people murdered. And there are still people out there trying to claim that even that never happened. So, and that brings me to the other happening that weighed on my heart this week, which was last night, the Fairfax County School Board meeting, which discussed the inclusion of Muslim, Jewish, and Hindu holidays as days off on the official school calendar, which, as many of you already know, did not get approved. And now there was a follow-up motion saying that they will go back and work on this for the next year. So there is still some hope for that. But there were still a lot of things that were said in that meeting that really stung. I don't know how many of you were on that meeting, but there was just a lot that was said that stung. It hurt. And I'm new here and I barely know the school district. So, I don't have the same history as other families do. But their words stung even for me because they really leaned into that wound that we Jews carry of being erased, of being rendered invisible, of not being heard or seen, of being minimized and ignored and shut down and told to go away. 16,000 people wrote letters to the school district urging the school board to include the holidays as days off. And 500 students signed a petition to the same effect. And what about that? Nothing, apparently, because the Christian members of the school board who voted against our holidays multiple times in that meeting said they believed they were following what their constituents wanted them to do. Yeah, I'm angry about that. I know a lot of members of our community are also. And I want to tell you that I hear that and I see that anger and I share it. So to me, it was especially poignant given that week, this week, and everything that happened, that the person whose words most moved me in that meeting last night were those of Rachna Sizemore Heiser, and I may be mispronouncing her name. Rachna, I think it's Rachna. She's an Asian American woman and a member of the FCPS school board who spoke so eloquently last night, and she identified with us as she urged her fellow board members to give the holidays off. And I want to read some of what she wrote. It's like our Torah tonight. She said, I spent a lot of time reflecting on what it was like being raised as a Hindu while attending public schools in California growing up. I was uncomfortable so many times a year when I was othered in so many ways, often unintentional, for my race or for my religion. I let myself think of many incidents and events that I had buried and diminished in my efforts to fit in, to be desperately seen as American when my skin color and my first name and my religion made many others view me as foreign, despite being born and raised in the United States. I can't tell you how many times, even well into adulthood, where I heard the phrase, but where are you really from? Or, wow, you speak English really well. Each time inside, I cried out, saying silently, as we model minority Asians often do, but why do you see me as foreign, as other? I am no different from you. Maybe it is my fault. Maybe if I just work harder to make that part of me disappear, you will accept me. To this day, she says, I have to intentionally work to allow myself to be Indian when I should be unencumbered in my pride, in my heritage. And she said, all of this has led me to view the calendar with equity, not equality, at the center of my thinking. It's not about being equal, it's about being equitable. It's about being inclusive. It's about starting somewhere to stop perpetuating the dominance of the majority, both in action and in understanding. And she continued, this calendar that was being proposed, it was called Calendar Option D, is othering. We are asking those of minority faiths to choose to other themselves to separate themselves from the majority, to segregate themselves by missing school, while everyone else continues together to learn and to engage. We are asking them to take personal days without pay, and they get the right to make it up. But for Christmas, no one is othered. No one has to make it up because we are all off. We are all the same on those days. But for everything else, we who are the other people are based on their differences. She said, I have felt this myself, as well as having been asked to speak for my entire religion or my culture when I didn't want to. There is a trauma, she says, that comes from this being othered. And I know because I've lived it since I was 5 years old. And there was more that she had to say, but that to me was the most moving part. So while there was a lot that was said in that meeting that hurt, that stung, Rashna's words gave me hope. Because she saw us, she identified with us, and she said in public, in front of everybody, that she identified with us. And so we weren't alone. Let us also not leave her and other Asian Americans alone either. Let us listen for their voices, their experience, their stories. Let us make room for them to be heard, rather than allowing them to be erased, as we so often stand by and do. In doing so, we may see reflections of our own stories in this process, of our own struggles, of our own growth. Opening our hearts to these stories, to these voices, none of us are alone. And there's just one last thing that I want to say about this whole situation. And it really struck me as I was reading the words of Psalm 92 tonight, which is our psalm for Shabbat, which we just read responsively earlier in the service. The Psalms are full of pleas for justice. And oftentimes we just sort of gloss over it like blah, blah, blah. But tonight, it felt really relevant and really important. Because ultimately, I believe there will be justice, just as it says in the Psalms. And I pray for that tonight. For those people whose hearts are hurting from things that were said and not done. I bring you the words of Psalm 92. The righteous will flourish like the palm tree. They will thrive like the cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord in our faith. They will flourish in the courts of our God. Even in old age, because we might be going at this for a while, they will bear fruit. There will be justice, retaining their vigor and their strength. And we will be given strength along the way, proclaiming that the Lord is just. because justice will be served. My rock, in whom there is no unrighteousness. Shabbat Shalom.